Yeah!
How are you? He's like the face of X Games, Winter Games, you know, snowboarding, surfing, skateboarding.
You're doing all this that like without cameras, but now you're adding cameras, you're adding multiple movies, and the fact that like you're basically putting together this puzzle of how you're going to be able to complete the task to eat, take care of family, and continue to do the thing. At what point did you realize or get to the position where you're like, this formula is not sustainable?
Job security is keep taking it to a new level. Like that's how you're gonna find new contracts if you just keep raising your snowboarding. And because I always looked at when I got into a helicopter, I'm like, there are 4 athletes that have a spot on this helicopter. How many people in the world want this spot? And if I'm going out there and like, oh, I'm good, I just do some glory pow turns, everyone's gonna be happy, I'm a total jackass. It's a disservice to the sport, it's a disservice to sponsors, to the opportunity, to the resources. And I just realized like I had gone as close to the edge as I was willing to go. My body was breaking down a little bit. That coincided with understanding more about the impacts of what I was having. And it was this real combination of things. And then this desire, like we quickly found, or not quickly, it took a while, but we found the edges of where you could take a helicopter. And then we'd like stand in the boundary and see this ocean of peaks and go, man, if we can figure out how to ride those, we have 95% more of the world's mountains to choose from. So if you think about that as a surfer, just looking off into...
Those are the Mentawais over there.
Yeah, and there's like, there's
waves for days.
Just it goes forever. And I was going out hiking and getting these incredible highs. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing I'm doing right now. And it was just going after that
You're
feeling.
getting a higher high.
I was getting a higher high. When I head over heels on it, I got to be, you go back to being a beginner, which is a wonderful thing, because when you're a beginner, there's all these, your opportunity to progress is so much simpler. It's just sitting right there. You're making every mistake in the world, and so every day you're getting better, and that's always a really nice thing.
One of the things that I just love when I'm looking at your body of work, which I'm sure when you look at it, you're like, how is that all transpired, is that, I don't know if it's universe driven or what, but every time momentum takes the thing that you're in a certain way, it seems like your natural thing is just to see the possibility of another direction and not have any other choice but just to find out what that is.
I mean, I struggled in high school. So I had no backup plan with snowboarding. It was like, I have no idea what I would have done, if it didn't work out. At snowboarding, you start, every time you sign a contract after 28, you're going, this could be the last one, better save. So I was actually very conservative with the money. I lived a very frugal life and was able to buy a house as soon as I could to understand like, wow, this could stop at any moment, and I really have no other skills. But at like 30, I was constantly riding with the pressure of like, am I going to get another contract?
Right.
And then
am I going to be able to continue to eat?
Yeah.
Or am I actually going to have to get
And my body
a job?
was breaking down doing that. And at 30, I remember going, I'm so grateful I've been able to do it this long, and I had this path that I'd wanted to go on, which was foot-powered snowboarding, for a while. And I kept being like, well, I got to go make sure I get my movie part to get my contract, and the quickest way to do that and get the most out of the handful of sunny days that you get a year where it all lines up is doing it how I traditionally was doing it, which was helicopters or snowmobiles. And then I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to do this forever, and it's time. And I mean, you're in these sports, like, you tap into a path in this sport, whether it's surfing, snowboarding, skating, what have you, that all of a sudden you're like a kid again. There's no way you're not going that way. And that's what this next phase, which was this foot-powered side. And I mean, the early Alaska stuff, I mean, as a kid on the East Coast, every kid wants to be out west, wants to get to Alaska. 'Cause that was a very clear path that was, it's like every time we went snowboarding, when it was a sunny day, we get back to the parking lot and it was like these sports were evolving. But then they get to a point where they're not evolving, and then you lose that amped up excitement.
It's like to wake up and be fired up where it's not solely feeling like a job, but as the job being the journey,
right?
Which you talk about so much. I mean, I also think that it must have been interesting at that time, because when I think about like where I was in snowboarding then, I'm in the height of my career at X Games.
Yeah.
And the X Games is exploding.
Yeah.
And really the X Games becomes like this sort of lens through which the rest of the world is now seeing snowboarding. Like, oh, that must be the whole thing of what snowboarding is. And during that time, big mountain riding, in as far as in films were concerned, was taking a dive, because it wasn't that it wasn't rad, but it wasn't relevant to the conversation of this instant popularity of what snowboarding was.
Well, and the snowboarding that was going on there was, so they were learning how to build better jumps, half pipes,
Spin the wind.
And then coincided with ESPN going, we're going to document it better than it's ever been documented.
We're gonna
put it live.
Yeah, we're gonna document it in the same way that you've watched your favorite football, basketball game, all the cameras, all the tricks. But now that's where the spotlight is, and you're deciding to go off and do this thing. What's the difference from a sort of satisfaction standpoint in being able to look up at a line and be like, okay, I want that, as opposed to a sled or a helicopter?
The whole experience, like the really serious lines, it's common for me to camp under them for 2 or 3 weeks, waiting, learning. It's like you're up against these dragons that you're just trying to get to know them. And then you break it down into section by section, and it's never been like, I'm gonna go ride this line. It's always like, I'm gonna go from here to here, and if it keeps feeling, if I could turn like 20 no's into 20 yeses, I'm gonna be able to stand on top of this thing. And I had to learn with the foot-powered stuff, because you get this like endorphin kind of runner's high, you have a ton of fear, like kind of dry heaving levels of fear, stand on the top, have this summit moment, and then drop in and go to this totally, no words for the way down space, and get this massive release of adrenaline at the bottom of that. And at times it leaves me like, on my knees, dry heaving, crying, screaming, because it's like every emotion in life in this like 12-hour time period.
That must have opened you up into a complete other zone of possibility as a human.
And that's what, why do we snowboard? Again, it's like you get this, you challenge yourself, it makes you feel good, you're creative, connect with nature. And so, we started hiking and no thought, like never, my path would have never worked if I was hiking going, man, I wish I could take a helicopter, but it's bad for the environment. We were hiking going, this is the coolest thing we've ever done. Like, now we're meeting the mountains on their terms. You need to have so many more skills, and just standing up there in this unhospitable place where, zero mistake place, just like the tips of your crampons holding you on the mountain and looking all around going, I am like comfortable, and a lot of like the good climbs, you don't want them to end because of where you are on the earth.
How did that influence your relationship with your equipment?
the whole foot-powered stuff led me to like, it's funny, like the two things I never wanted to do was make my own film, which is when I say that, that's a huge group effort. But lead a film project, direct a film, and start my own snowboard company. And I, with very little pre-thought, I did both of those in like a 1.5 year period.
Why?
I did it because I'm just like, with the snowboards, I got sick of trying to convince people to make the split boards I wanted.
What did you want?
So back then, there just wasn't a lot of progression in split boarding. There was very few options, so we were cutting our own boards. So
Taking a conventional board
and cutting them in half. And then they get soft, the connections aren't that great. And so we were really like, early on, you'd get ready to drop in and be like, hey, you're on a split board, like you got to tone it back like 15-20% here.
Because this isn't built for this.
You
rigged it for this.
Yeah, this is not going to work how that snowboard has been working for you for the last 10-20 years. So we needed to solve that problem. And then the foot-powered stuff, it was just, I kept wanting to do more of it, and I kept falling into the trap of like, we're late in the year, we can't do that foot-powered trip because we got to get shots, so you get your video part, and then it hit me, I'm like, the only way this is going to work is if we just need to go all in. And instead of doing like my last season making films with a helicopter, I was a part of 5 films. And then when I went to foot-powered snowboarding, I called my sponsors and were like, hey, I'm actually only going to be in 1 film and it's going to take me 2 years to make it. It was just this thing of like that, following my passion is what I've been doing since I was a kid, and it's been working out for me, and trying to just keep doing that.
It's a powerful theme and choice that it seems like I said at the beginning, like you don't have a choice but to make, and so you figure out, how do I do this in a way that stays as true to me as possible? But also, as risky as it must have felt like to be like, oh, there goes the security, and like these 5 films a year were always a thing, there must have been like this breath.
That's life, right? Like to get out on the edge, like leave security to follow a passion. And I know you've done this, and I know we're speaking the same language here. And the irony is, I don't make those moves like, oh, whatever, I'm just following my passion. I mean, that's stuff that in my head, that's keeping me up at night. Like, what are you doing? Just like, it's working. Why would you start a snowboard company? Why would you, do these different things? And I think I've lost more sleep taking societal risks than I have knowing that, say, the next day I'm going to take life risks on the mountain. And it's weird how society or life, it's scary taking life risks.
It is. I remember when I decided that I was leaving the X Games.
So that's my point. It's like, I know you've had spots in your career, like how terrifying to leave the comfort of the X Games, guaranteed airtime.
It was insane. I mean, I'd been there for 13 years. I, to a certain degree, I was seen as sort of the voice in the face of the culture because this is the place where it's the loudest. I didn't think of myself that way, but that's how
we think of it.
that's what it developed into, and ESPN's the worldwide leader in sports.
Yeah.
Like you said, guaranteed airtime all around the world, and you host the biggest thing that influences the culture. It was both a difficult decision and an easy decision in the same way that you're describing, obviously, relatively speaking, because at that point, I didn't feel like the X Games actually was serving the culture in a way that was making the sports better.
Right.
They're not necessarily investing in the riders and furthering and growing the sports the way they were when I got here.
Yeah.
I could have stayed, made great money, and continued to have that guarantee of being on television all the time, but it wasn't making me feel whole, and I didn't want to be that person who makes a lot of money, but is bitter at their job.
Or like, I'm sure when you first went to the X Games, you were like,
I was
oh my
fired
God,
up.
like get me there.
Let's go.
Yeah,
Like that's what it felt like. And the second it didn't feel that way anymore, and it felt like, all right. I was like, I like you said, I shouldn't be taking up this space.
It's exactly the same
Like if I
thing.
can't be here fired up, and these kids on the other side of the camera who have grown up with me and are like, you're our pilot, let's go.
Right.
If I can't deliver that anymore, then I was like, I don't know if I should be here. And maybe what does the next chapter look like? And it was so scary. I remember when I told my agent, my lawyer, everybody, like, all right, I'm out. I'm gonna go do this deal at Red Bull. Everyone was like, wait, you're gonna do what?
Right. Nobody leaves like that. You
don't do that.
Right.
But I had an opportunity to remain in the culture, but go and spend time back in the roots of the individual sports, doing events that were raised and built within the culture. And that 3-ring circus that they provided exploded the sports and made careers and household names, and it's infinite what it did. But it just wasn't that anymore. And I wanted to be back and feel like it felt like in the beginning, which what you're talking about is like, just feels like the beginning again.
And they're like, jumping out of bed, like just so amping. I mean, ideally, that's just chasing that feeling.
Yeah, like for a long time when you're young, like what I do was sort of the definition of who I was. And when making that move, it was like, no, who I am is what influences what I do.
And I think seeking that feeling that you get, when you're like the first day of the new job, or just that, when you're living this excited, jazzed life, and even what seemingly is the perfect job, as your agents would say, it's tough to turn your back on something like that, but that's where life gets exciting, is, that new challenges.
My dad was a musician.
I knew that, yeah.
And I feel like when I see your life and the time that you spent on the road, it was much the way I experienced my dad, where my time with my dad was amazing that we spent together, but then he would be gone in these big chunks. How has that been for you as a father? Because I know being a father is a huge priority for you, but you got to do this thing to be you in order to be all those other things.
My hardest days on the job have been saying goodbye to my kids, knowing that I'm going to some high risk, no mistake trip for a couple weeks. That's really hard. So it's wild, because it's like, in so many ways, they're with me in the mountains, and then I get to a spot in the mountains and it's like, I can't have anyone with me here, mentally. Like, this is my, like...
You got to push it
they're gone.
away.
And I'm no longer a husband, a father. I'm just like all attention on what I do. But it's also, I think it's important for my kids see Dad's working really hard on a goal right now, and he's got to do stuff, and it's a little bit hard, but there is a bit of like, I don't know how often your father was away, but I would assume being a musician maybe at a much higher level. I don't know, but I could always look at a year, at 365, and be like, my schedule's working, because the amount of time that when I am home, I really try to be present and be there to pick them up from school and what have you. But the saying goodbye to go on a serious trip is very, there's nothing good about that.
Yeah. So when you're at home, you're not Jeremy Jones, is what you're saying.
Yeah, no. That's the beauty of fatherhood, though, because I mean, every kid thinks their dad's a dork and what have you, and like, we're all just trying to get some cred, and but now we're in a new phase where we're like really doing these sports together, and the things that I wanted, like, that are really important to me, I really slow played them because I didn't want to, like, be that over push them and burn them out on it.
Little league dad.
Little league dad, and it's worked. Now I've almost created like monsters, like how amping they are now.
Dad, let's go.
Yes, and I mean, my daughter recently woke me up at 5:45 in the morning, pitch black, to go surf. And what it has given me as this perspective is how, like, I've committed my life, not just to snowboarding, but to a bunch of different sports. Because whatever this time of year is, I'm like into whatever nature's ripe for at that time. And to experience these sports with kids is where you really realize how special they are. Because that family time of on the mountain, in the water, climbing, what have you, and there's got to be a level of trust, there's overcoming fear, there's joy, there's tough days, there's glory days. All of the elements of these sports it's hands down the coolest stuff we do as a family.
It's awesome. You talked about that moment where you're at the TB6 premiere and it hits, people react, you're here. What was it like with Deeper, where this is your movie, you spent a couple of years making it? What was that process like, wondering if there was gonna be a full buy-in?
I remember with Deeper, we had the premiere in my hometown, outdoor amphitheater, big amphitheater, and I'm like, oh my God, I hope just like 400 people come, because it was like seated like 1,200 people. Outdoor, you know, so it was a big venue, and I'm like, it's gonna, like, I just want it to not look totally dead. And it's like an hour before, and there's no one there, and I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be embarrassing in front of my hometown. And then people start showing up, and then they're like, traffic's backed up 10 miles down the road, and then we pack the place, and I get up, and I remember like getting on stage and looking out to my kids' preschool teacher and all these people. It was actually funny because these new parent friends had no idea what I did. And then they're like,
you're just the guy who drops the kids off.
Yeah, you get to
talks
be a
about your kids
dad,
together,
which
right?
is the beauty of parenthood, is we're all just trying to make sure our kids got sunscreen and water and food. And but I remember introducing, it was very emotional. My whole family's there, and then I like to watch the films from way back, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, is this like the walk-off? Like, am I done? Like, just leave it at this. This is like so idyllic, like, you've done it, walk away. And I didn't, but I thought hard about that.
You guys want a break?
Yeah, let's do a quick break.
Let's do a quick break, yeah.
Unbelievable, boys. You guys are legends.
No worries.
Insane.